a spray of cleaning solution is all it took to end her career. Ainsley Robinson, a black woman drowning in $120,000 of student debt, accidentally interrupted the late-night meeting of German billionaire Adelbert Engel while cleaning his Manhattan office after midnight. She watched in horror as her supervisor, Rick Donovan, groveled. But as she backed away with her cart, Engel turned to his associates and began speaking in harsh, rapid German. He called her incompetent, lazy, a diversity hire, who probably couldn't even spell her own name. He assumed the cleaning woman was invisible. He assumed she was ignorant. What he didn't know was that Ainsley's $120,000 in debt came from a doctorate in Germanic studies. She turned around, looked him dead in the eye, and the words that came out of her mouth next, in perfect Viennese dialect, didn't just stop his heart. They shattered his world and rebuilt hers. We've all met an Adelbert Engel, the boss who judges competence by appearance. The executive who mistakes a uniform for a lack of intelligence. The person in power who speaks their prejudice freely because they assume you're too simple to understand. They look right through people, janitors, servers, assistants, drivers, as if these jobs define the limits of a person's mind, as if brilliance can only exist in corner offices and expensive suits. Here's what they never consider. The person cleaning their office might hold a doctorate. The server bringing their coffee might speak 4 languages. The help they dismiss without a second thought might be more educated, more capable, more brilliant than they'll ever be. Engel's real crime wasn't speaking German. It was assuming invisibility meant ignorance. If this story resonates with you, it's because you've either been Ainsley, overlooked, underestimated, dismissed, or you've witnessed it happen to someone else. You've seen talent wasted because it came in the wrong package. You've watched brilliant people forced into survival mode because the world refuses to recognize their worth. This is for everyone who's ever been judged by their uniform instead of their mind. For everyone who's been told they're too much or not enough based on how they look, where they're from, or what they do to pay the bills. For everyone carrying the crushing weight of student debt, working jobs that have nothing to do with their degrees, wondering if their education was a terrible mistake. You are not invisible, you are not incompetent, and you are not alone. Ainsley's story is proof that your worth isn't determined by who sees it. It's determined by what you know, what you've survived, and the courage you show when someone finally gives you the chance to prove them catastrophically wrong. To everyone watching from New York, Lagos, London, and everywhere in between, this story is for you. Whether you're in a corner office or a cramped apartment, on your lunch break or scrolling at 2 a.m., you're exactly where you need to be. If this resonates, subscribe right now. We're building a community of people who refuse to be invisible. People who know the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone underestimates. Keep reading, because what happens next will change everything. The security desk phone buzzed, a sound that had become the soundtrack to Ainsley Robinson's waking nightmare. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Thursday, and Paramount Tower, a corporate skyscraper so exclusive it required 3 forms of ID just to enter the lobby, was nearly empty. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and old money. Ainsley, 25, pushed her cart down the corridor of the 63rd floor, the wheels squeaking against the marble with each step. Each office she passed contained furniture worth more than her entire studio apartment in Harlem. She was, by any academic measure, a genius. She held a PhD in Germanic studies from Columbia University. She could analyze 18th century German philosophy in 3 dialects and translate Rilke's most complex poetry from the original Austrian German. She could discuss Kant in Hochdeutsch and debate Wittgenstein in Viennese. Her dissertation on Rilke's Austrian influences had been called groundbreaking by her committee. She was also $118,750 in debt. This crushing weight was why she was here in Paramount Tower in Midtown Manhattan at midnight, wearing a Navy maintenance uniform with Robinson stitched on the pocket, cleaning offices for people who looked through her as if she were a ghost. People who would never hire her for what she actually knew. People who would never see the brilliant mind behind the brown skin and the cleaning cart. The double life had become routine. Days were spent hunched over her laptop in her cramped studio, firing off applications to academic positions across the country, adjunct professor in Ohio, lecturer in Wisconsin, assistant professor in Montana, 50 applications sent, 42 rejections, 8 silences that felt worse than rejection. At night, she pushed a cart through the towers of Manhattan, emptying trash bins for executives who earned more in a week than she would see in 5 years. Robinson, floor 63 needs immediate attention. Executive suite. Meeting running late. Rick Donovan's voice crackled over her radio, sharp with the particular anxiety he reserved for wealthy tenants. Rick was her supervisor, a man who resented her from the moment he'd seen Columbia University on her employment application. He'd called her uppity within her first week. He made sure she got the worst shifts, the hardest floors. "On my way," Ainsley responded, her voice flat. Marcus, the older cleaner working floor 58, caught her eye as she headed to the elevator. He shook his head slowly, a warning. "Keep your head down around the penthouse people," he told her on her first night. "They don't see us, and that's how we stay employed." The bitter truth was that she had spent 8 years becoming an expert in something the world didn't value. 8 years mastering Hochdeutsch, Bavarian, Viennese, Swiss, German. 8 years translating medieval texts and parsing 18th century philosophy. And now she was invisible to everyone. The academics wouldn't hire her. The executives wouldn't see her. She existed in a strange purgatory between 2 worlds, belonging to neither. The elevator chimed as it reached 63, the executive suites. Ainsley wheeled her cart down the hallway, her heart sinking as she realized which office needed attention. The nameplate gleamed in the dim light. Adalbert Engel, CEO, Engel Industries. She'd read about him in the business pages. Austrian billionaire. Automotive manufacturing empire. Old money, older prejudices. The kind of man who'd built an empire on the backs of people he'd never bothered to learn the names of. Her radio crackled again. "Robinson, conference room adjacent to Engel's office. Meeting's running late, but they need the space cleaned. Do not interrupt them. Don't be seen, don't be heard, don't screw this up. You understand me?" "Understood," Ainsley said. She approached the conference area quietly, years of night shift work having taught her to move like a shadow. Through the glass wall, she could see them. 4 men in expensive suits around a polished table covered in documents, and at the head of the table, Adalbert Engel himself, silver hair swept back from a severe face, sharp features that looked carved from ice. Mid-40s, wearing his wealth like armor. He was gesturing emphatically, his voice muffled but clearly agitated. A $3 billion merger negotiation, according to the business news. The kind of deal that would make headlines. The kind of money that could pay off her student loans 100 times over. Ainsley let herself into the adjoining space, a smaller room separated from the main conference area by glass panels. She could see everything. They couldn't see her at all. She was furniture. She was air. She began her work with practiced silence. Empty the trash, wipe down surfaces, check her spray bottle malfunctioned. Instead of a gentle mist, it released a sharp, violent spray that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet tower. The sound shattered the night. In the conference room, the conversation stopped dead. 4 heads turned in unison. 4 sets of eyes found her through the glass. And then Adalbert Engel was rising from his chair, his face darkening with fury. He strode toward the door between them, each step deliberate, controlled rage. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. His eyes swept over her uniform, her cart, her brown skin. She watched his expression shift from anger to something worse. Dismissal, complete and total dismissal. And then he turned back to his associates and began speaking. Not in English, in rapid, harsh, contemptuous German. Every word was a knife, and Ainsley understood every single one. Engel's voice cut through the glass like a blade. Das ist genau das Problem mit amerikanischen Unternehmen. Inkompetenz auf jeder Ebene. This is exactly the problem with American companies. Incompetence at every level. Ainsley's hand stilled on her cleaning cart. She understood every word, every syllable, every drop of contempt. Sie stellen diese Leute ein, Quoten zu erfüllen, nicht weil sie qualifiziert sind. They hire these people to fill quotas, not because they're qualified. One of the American executives shifted uncomfortably, but Engel wasn't finished. He gestured dismissively toward the glass, toward Ainsley, as if she were a stain on his expensive furniture. Sehen Sie sie an! Sie kann wahrscheinlich nicht einmal ihren eigenen Namen buchstabieren, geschweige denn Qualitätsarbeit verstehen. Look at her. She probably can't even spell her own name, let alone understand quality work. The words landed like punches. Ainsley had heard variations of them her entire academic career whispered in faculty lounges, hidden behind smiles at conferences, but never so nakedly, never so cruel. Nur eine weitere faule Diversity-Einstellung. Schicken Sie sie weg. Sie ruiniert meine Konzentration. Just another lazy diversity hire. Send her away. She's ruining my concentration. One of his associates gave a nervous, sycophantic laugh. Engel smirked, turning back to his documents, utterly assured that the black woman with the cleaning cart understood nothing, that she was invisible, that she was too stupid to comprehend the insults flying over her head in his native tongue. The door burst open. Rick Donovan rushed in, his face blotchy with panic and rage. Mr. Engel, I am so sorry. She's new. She doesn't know the protocols. He grabbed Ainsley's arm, his fingers digging into her bicep, and began physically pushing her toward the door. I'll have her fired immediately. Right now. She's done. Ainsley felt the familiar shame rising in her throat, the familiar silence closing around her like a fist. This was how it always went. The microaggressions, the assumptions, the casual cruelty from people who never expected to be understood, never expected to be challenged. People who spoke their bigotry freely because they assumed you were too ignorant to comprehend it. She had swallowed it for 8 years. Through graduate seminars where professors mispronounced her name. Through academic conferences where colleagues asked if she was lost. Through job interviews where hiring committees smiled tightly and said they'd gone another direction. But something inside Ainsley Robinson snapped. The bitter irony was too much. Being called stupid in the very language she had mastered. Being dismissed as incompetent in German literature by a man who probably couldn't parse a single stanza of Rilke without her help. Ainsley stopped walking. Rick's hand was still on her arm, pulling. I said move. She turned around. Herr Engel, she said, her voice clear and crisp in perfect Hochdeutsch. Ihre Annahme ist falsch. Ich bin nicht incompetent. Your assumption is incorrect. I am not incompetent. The room went silent. The kind of silence that follows a grenade. Rick's hand fell away from her arm. The American executives froze, their faces going from confusion to dawning horror. And Adalbert Engel stopped mid-gesture, his pen suspended in air, his entire body rigid. Ainsley took a step forward, switching effortlessly to Viennese dialect, the warm, rounded vowels of his native Austria. Ich bin keine Diversity-Einstellung. Ich habe einen Doktortitel in Germanistik. Ich kann meinen Namen in 3 Alphabeten buchstabieren. Ich kann auch Ihren buchstabieren und ich vermute, dass mehr Schande trägt als meiner. I am not a diversity hire. I hold a doctorate in Germanic studies. I can spell my name in 3 alphabets. I can also spell yours, and I suspect it carries more shame than mine does. Engel's face drained of all color. He looked as if he'd been struck, as if the furniture had suddenly spoken, as if the ghost had become flesh. Ainsley continued, her voice steady, quoting Rilke in flawless German. Vielleicht sind alle Drachen unseres Lebens Prinzessinnen, die nur darauf warten, uns einmal schön und mutig zu sehen. You've spent your life mistaking cruelty for strength, Herr Engel. Jesus Christ, Adalbert, one of the American partners breathed. Did she just... She... Engel stammered, switching to English, his composure completely shattered. His eyes were wide, disbelieving. She had exposed him, in front of his associates, in front of his merger partners. She had pulled back the curtain on his arrogance. "You're done!" Rick shrieked, his voice cracking. "Get out! Now! You're fired!" Engel said nothing. He just stood there, paralyzed by shock and humiliation. Ainsley reached down and slowly untied her uniform vest. She folded it neatly, precisely, and set it on the nearest chair. "I'll collect my final paycheck tomorrow, Mr. Donovan." She turned to face Engel one last time, switching back to English. "I hope your merger succeeds, Herr Engel. Though judging by your negotiation skills, I doubt it." Then she walked out. The elevator ride down felt like falling. By the time Ainsley stepped out into the cold 2 a.m. Manhattan streets, reality was crashing down on her like a building collapse. She was unemployed. Rent was due in 10 days, $200 she didn't have. Her student loan payment was due in 8 days, $950 she couldn't make. Her bank account held exactly $387. The moment of defiance that had felt so righteous, so powerful in that conference room, now felt reckless, suicidal. She had let her pride destroy her survival. Ainsley walked the 30 blocks to Harlem because she couldn't afford the subway. By the time she reached her studio apartment, her feet were blistering, and dawn was breaking over the East River. She sat on her secondhand couch and stared at the wall. She didn't cry. She was too numb for tears. Her phone buzzed at 9:47 a.m. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Ms. Robinson, I'm calling from Engel Industries." The voice was crisp, professional, female. Ainsley's heart stopped. She was sitting on her couch in the same clothes she'd worn home, having never made it to bed. Her mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. He was suing her. He was blacklisting her. He was... "Mr. Engel requests an immediate meeting at his residence. A car is en route to your location." "I don't think..." Ainsley started. "It will be worth your while, Dr. Robinson. Please be ready in 15 minutes. The line went dead. 14 minutes later, Ainsley stood on the curb outside her building in her only interview suit, a black blazer and pants she'd bought on sale 3 years ago, watching a black Mercedes S-Class glide to a stop in front of her Harlem walk-up. The driver, silent and professionally blank-faced, opened the rear door. She slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The drive to Fifth Avenue felt like being transported to another planet. The car pulled into an underground garage beneath a building so exclusive it didn't have visible signage, a private elevator, a key card, a wordless ascent. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. Ainsley stepped into 15,000 square feet of minimalist wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Central Park like a painting. Everything was white, black, chrome, cold and expensive and utterly without warmth, like its owner. Adelbert Engel stood by the windows, backlit by morning sun. He'd traded his suit for cashmere and contrition. "Ms. Robinson, please sit." She didn't. She stood by the elevator, every muscle coiled, ready to flee. He turned to face her, and something in his expression had changed. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something she hadn't expected: shame. "Last night I was unforgivably arrogant," he said quietly. "What I said was racist, classist, and wrong. I have spent the entire night examining my own prejudices. I have no excuse." Ainsley's throat tightened. She'd been prepared for threats, for manipulation, for anything but this. "Thank you for the apology, Mr. Engel," she said, her voice guarded. "But I didn't bring you here just to apologize." He gestured to the white leather couch. "Please, sit. I need to explain something." Warily, Ainsley sat. Engel took the chair across from her, leaning forward, his hands clasped. "Engel Industries is in the process of acquiring Hoffman Automotive, a 150-year-old Austrian family company. If successful, the merger will create Europe's third largest auto manufacturer. $3 billion. Ainsley said nothing, waiting. The Hoffman family is old-world Austrian aristocracy. Traditional, formal, the negotiations are collapsing. He ran a hand through his silver hair. "The Americans think the Austrians are stalling. The Austrians think the Americans are disrespectful." Everyone is talking past each other. "Cultural misunderstandings," Ainsley said quietly. "Exactly." His eyes locked on hers. "My lead cultural consultant retired last week. I've been using a translation service, and it's been a disaster. Then, last night, you responded to me in Viennese. My native dialect. You quoted Rilke. You understood not just my words, but my arrogance, the subtext, the insult beneath the insult." He stood, walked to his desk, and returned with a single piece of paper. "I need someone who understands Austrian business culture, family dynamics, linguistic subtleties that a translation app can't parse. I need someone who can navigate the difference between what's said and what's meant." He held out the paper. "I need you." It was a cashier's check, made out to Ainsley Robinson, for $1,500,000. The world tilted. "That's your signing bonus," Engel continued, his voice steady. "The full contract is $3.5 million for 3 months. Your title would be Chief Cultural Strategist. If the deal fails, you keep the bonus. If it succeeds, there's a substantial completion fee." Ainsley stared at the check. More money than her parents had earned in their entire lifetimes combined. More money than she'd ever imagined holding. "Why?" she whispered. "Because last night, in 30 seconds, you demonstrated more cultural intelligence than my entire team has shown in 3 months. Because you're brilliant, and because I was a fool not to see it immediately." Her hands trembled. She could pay off her debt. All of it. She could afford food, rent, a life that wasn't constant survival. But she forced herself to look up from the check to meet his eyes. "I have conditions, Mr. Engel." Something like respect flickered across his face. "Name them." "I am not your employee. I am your strategic partner." When it comes to Austrian culture and language, my word is final. If I tell you you're making a mistake, you listen. You defer to my expertise. She stood, holding the check but not looking at it. I will not be treated as the help ever again. Is that clear? For the first time, Adalbert Engel smiled. It was barely there, just a ghost at the corner of his mouth. Crystal clear, Dr. Robinson. The next 24 hours passed in a surreal blur. The bank teller's eyes widened when Ainsley deposited the check. An upscale salon in Tribeca, a personal shopper at Bergdorf Goodman who didn't blink at the corporate card. A temporary apartment in a building with a doorman who called her Dr. Robinson. And documents, stacks of merger documents, emails, failed negotiations. Ainsley spread them across her new dining table and worked through the night, her mind finally doing what it was trained to do. The problem revealed itself within hours. The translation service had been using formal, stiff German, Hochdeutsch, appropriate for legal documents, but culturally tone-deaf. The Austrians expected a specific blend of formality and personal warmth, a dance of respect and relationship building. The Americans, translated into cold transactional German, sounded dismissive of legacy, impatient with tradition. The Austrians, their careful indirectness mistranslated, sounded evasive and untrustworthy. Both sides were insulting each other without knowing it. At 6 a.m., a car arrived to take her to Teterboro Airport. Ainsley climbed the stairs of the private jet and found Engel already seated, reviewing documents. "We're going to fail," she said without preamble, "unless you let me completely reframe this negotiation." He looked up, his expression serious. "Explain." "The Hoffmans don't think you respect their legacy. Everything in your communication has signaled that you view them as an acquisition, not a partnership. You need to show humility. You need to honor their history before you can secure their future." Engel was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed his folder and met her eyes. "Show me how." The Hoffman estate sat 30 kilometers outside Vienna. An 18th century manor house surrounded by immaculate grounds that had been tended by the same families for generations. Ainsley stepped out of the car and felt history pressing down on her. This wasn't just a company, it was a legacy. Inside, the conference room was a study in old-world elegance, crystal chandeliers, dark wood paneling, generations of family portraits staring down from the walls, and at the head of the table, Victor Hoffman, 72, silver-bearded, eyes sharp as cut glass. His sons Stefan and Marcus flanked him like sentries. The atmosphere was ice-cold, formal hostility. Ainsley opened in formal German, her voice clear and respectful. "Herr Hoffmann, meine Herren, it is an honor to be in your home." Then she shifted, softening her vowels into warm Viennese. "Mr. Engel deeply regrets that previous communications failed to honor the extraordinary legacy your family has built over 150 years. Victor's eyes narrowed. This was different. For 2 hours, Ainsley was a maestro. She didn't just translate words, she translated intent, context, cultural nuance. When the Americans pushed for timelines, she reframed their directness as eagerness to begin this partnership rather than disrespect for tradition. When Victor spoke in careful indirection about labor concerns, she translated the subtext. He was protecting his workers, not stalling. The Hoffmans began to soften. Victor's shoulders relaxed. He even smiled once, a crack in the austere facade. They were close, so close to agreement. During a break, Ainsley stood near the refreshment table, reviewing her notes. Klaus Weber, Engel's senior vice president for European operations, Austrian, 50-something, supposedly Engel's most trusted advisor, approached Victor near the window. They spoke in rapid Austrian dialect, clearly thinking they were having a private conversation. Ainsley heard every word. "Herr Hoffmann," Klaus said quietly, "you should know. These Americans will dismantle everything your grandfather built. Engel has plans to move production to the Czech Republic within 2 years. 800 Austrian jobs gone." Victor's face hardened with anger. When the meeting resumed, Klaus returned to Engel's side, his expression carefully neutral. "The old man is being stubborn about the labor terms," he murmured. "He won't budge." Ainsley's mind raced. Klaus was lying. She pulled out her phone under the table, quickly searching Klaus Weber's background. His brother-in-law, there, senior executive at Der AG, Engel's primary competitor, promoted to VP just last month. Klaus wasn't just sabotaging the deal. He was committing industrial espionage. She caught Engel's eye and tilted her head slightly toward the door. In the hallway, she kept her voice low and urgent. "Klaus is feeding the Hoffmans lies. He just told Victor you're planning to move production to Czech Republic and eliminate 800 Austrian jobs. None of that is in your proposal." Engel's face went cold with fury. "That son of a..." "His brother-in-law works for Der AG, just got promoted. Klaus has been sabotaging this from the inside. If we accuse him without proof, we'll look paranoid and destroy what little trust we've built," Ainsley finished. "We need to trap him, but I need you to trust me completely." Engel held her gaze. "Do it." Back in the conference room, Ainsley proposed a compromise clause in English, phrasing it deliberately ambiguously. She turned to Klaus. "Herr Weber, could you present this to Herr Hoffmann in German? Please make it sound as generous as possible." Klaus, eager to appear helpful, agreed immediately. When he began speaking to Victor in German, Ainsley listened carefully. He was mistranslating, making Engel's offer sound conditional and deceptive, exactly as she'd predicted. Victor's face darkened. "Das ist nicht, was wir vereinbart haben." "This is not what we agreed." "Herr Weber," Ainsley said clearly, her voice cutting through the tension, "that's not what Mr. Engel said. That's not even close." The room froze. She turned to Victor, speaking directly in Viennese. "I apologize, Herr Hoffmann. There has been a serious mistranslation." She repeated what Engel had actually said in English, then what Klaus had translated. The difference was stark. Klaus's face went pale. "It's merely a dialect difference, a nuance." "No," Ainsley said firmly, "it's corporate espionage." She pulled out her phone, showing Engel the connection she'd found. "Herr Weber's brother-in-law is a senior vice president at Der AG, your primary competitor. He was promoted last month. Herr Weber has been systematically mistranslating for weeks, creating conflict where none should exist." Victor Hoffmann was a shrewd businessman. She watched his face as understanding clicked into place. He picked up his phone and made a call, speaking in rapid Austrian dialect that Ainsley translated quietly for Engel. 30 seconds later, Victor's expression confirmed everything. "Klaus," Engel said, his voice like frozen steel, "you're finished. Security will escort you out. Now." Klaus tried to defend himself, stammering excuses, but 2 security personnel appeared and removed him from the room. The door closed with a heavy finality. Silence settled over the conference room. The deal seemed dead, trust shattered. Then Victor Hoffmann looked directly at Ainsley. "Dr. Robinson, you could have let this continue. Why expose it?" "Because both our companies deserve honesty, Herr Hoffmann, and because your family's legacy deserves better than to be manipulated by a traitor." Victor studied her for a long moment. "Your German is extraordinary. Where did you study?" "Columbia University. I wrote my dissertation on Rilke's Austrian period." Victor's eyes widened. "Marcus," he said to his younger son, "did you hear that? She's a Rilke scholar." Marcus Hoffman, who Ainsley had learned was an art collector, leaned forward with sudden interest. "You studied the Austrian period specifically?" "His time in Museau, the elegies, the relationship between landscape and language. This," Victor said slowly, "changes everything." The negotiations resumed, but now the Hoffman spoke not to Engel but through Ainsley, respecting her not just as a translator but as a fellow scholar, someone who understood what they valued most. The deal that emerged was better than anyone had imagined, fair, balanced, built on mutual respect. When Victor Hoffman signed the final documents, he looked at Engel and said, "We will work with anyone who respects our culture the way Dr. Robinson does." On the private jet back to New York, Engel was quiet for most of the flight. Then he finally spoke. "How did you know Klaus would mistranslate?" Ainsley looked up from her laptop. "I didn't. I gambled on his greed and arrogance. Men who betray others always overestimate their own cleverness. They can't resist one more deception." Engel stared at her, then let out a low, genuine laugh. "You ran a psychological operation, in a language most people don't even speak. You saved a $3 billion deal and exposed a traitor in the same afternoon." He shook his head. "That signing bonus was the bargain of my life." The first thing Ainsley did, with the completion bonus, was walk into Chase Bank on 125th Street and pay off her student loans in full. All $118,750. The banker who processed the transaction kept glancing at her, as if expecting the system to flag the payment as fraud. When the confirmation printed, Ainsley stared at the words, "Balance 0.0, until they blurred. She made it to her car before she started crying. They weren't quiet tears. They were 8 years of exhaustion, shame, and terror pouring out of her in wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for every night she'd chosen between groceries and loan payments, for every academic job she'd been rejected from, for every time she'd pushed a cleaning cart past people who would never see her brilliance. When she could finally breathe again, she called her mother. "Mama," she whispered, "I'm free. The debt is gone." Her mother wept too, and Ainsley could hear decades of worry breaking apart in those tears. Her parents had sacrificed everything to help her through undergrad, watching helplessly as graduate school debt swallowed their daughter's future. Now, finally, the weight was gone. 1 week later, Ainsley returned to Engel's penthouse, wearing a custom Armani suit. Her natural hair styled in a professional crown of curls. She felt like a different person. She was a different person. Engel stood when she entered, and something in his expression had shifted. The dynamic between them had fundamentally changed. "Congratulations, Dr. Robinson, on everything." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "But I have a new proposal." Ainsley sat, curious. The Hoffman family doesn't just want this merger. They want an exclusive American partnership, long-term collaboration. He leaned forward. "They want you specifically. They trust you. They respect you. And they've made it clear that future deals depend on your involvement." "That's promising," Ainsley said carefully. "I need a new division. European Cultural Strategy and Relations." Companies are desperate for this kind of expertise, and they don't even know it yet. The potential is extraordinary. His eyes locked on hers. "I want you to run it, not as an employee, as a partner." The word hung in the air between them. "Full executive partnership in the division," Engel continued. "Percentage of every deal you broker. Your own office, team, budget, complete autonomy. You won't work for me, Ainsley. You'll work with me." Ainsley studied him, looking for the catch. but his expression was sincere, even vulnerable. "Why?" she asked quietly. Engel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "My grandmother was a brilliant woman. She spoke 5 languages fluently. She worked as a maid in Vienna because that's all she was allowed to do as a woman in the 1950s. He walked to the window, his back to her. "She taught me German, taught me to love language and culture. She could discuss philosophy, literature, history, but my grandfather dismissed her intelligence as cute. Said it was wasted on a woman." He turned to face her. "When I insulted you that night, I became my grandfather. I did to you what was done to her." The honesty in his face was striking. "This partnership isn't charity, Ainsley. It's justice. And it's smart business." Ainsley felt something shift in her chest. She stood, walking to stand across from him. "I accept, on one condition." "Name it." "We establish a foundation, the Engel Robinson Scholarship Fund." Her voice was steady, clear. "Full-ride scholarships for humanities PhD. Students of color. So the next brilliant mind doesn't have to clean offices. So they never have to choose between their passion and survival." She met his eyes. "And we fund debt forgiveness for scholars already trapped." Engel didn't hesitate. "Done. We'll fund it with 5% of annual company profits. It will be the first thing we announce publicly." They shook hands. No longer billionaire and cleaning woman, but partners building something that mattered. The press conference announcing the merger was held at the Plaza Hotel. Engel stood at the podium and publicly introduced Dr. Ainsley Robinson as executive partner of European Cultural Strategy. Then he did something that silenced the room. "I owe Dr. Robinson and this audience an apology," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "I judged Dr. Robinson by her uniform, not her mind. I was wrong. This partnership exists because she refused to accept my prejudice, and because she proved that brilliance exists everywhere, if we're willing to see it." 6 months later, Ainsley stood at the back of Columbia University's auditorium, watching 20 PhD students of color receive the first Engel Robinson scholarships. Her mother sat in the front row, crying with pride. These young scholars would never face the terror Ainsley had lived through. They would never have to choose between their dreams and survival. Engel approached quietly. "You never told me why you studied German." Ainsley smiled softly. "My grandmother was a German teacher. She died when I was young. She taught me that language is power, that understanding others is how we change the world." She looked at the scholarship recipients, their faces bright with hope and possibility. "I think she'd be proud." Engel nodded. "I think my grandmother would be too." Ainsley Robinson refused to stay invisible, and it changed her entire life. She didn't just survive being underestimated. She turned it into power. She used her moment to build something bigger than revenge, a system that lifts others up. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe so you never miss stories about people who refuse to accept the world's limited vision of them. People who prove that your worth isn't determined by your uniform, your debt, or someone else's prejudice. Drop a comment. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked or what you did for work? What happened? This is for everyone who's ever been invisible. You're not alone, and your story matters.